Why in the world would one person be so audacious enough to suggest to another man a best practice of fatherhood? And I've had some discussions with some of my friends around this topic. I've had some discussions with some people who probably wouldn't consider me their friend around this topic as they're asking me about the Intentional Father podcast. And so I want to address that specifically right now because season 3 has just ended. Season 3 was navigating the waters of divorce. That's part of my story. And I think it's really important for single dads to be super intentional with their fatherhood. Now we're going into season 4. It's going to be much more applicable to anyone. So if you're not going through divorce, haven't been through divorce, that was season 3 was kind of for that. Now season 4, we're back to parenting. Every father's going to be able to relate to every episode. But still the question remains, like, what gives a person the integrity or the authority to suggest a certain parenting style or a best practice to another man? And that's a really good question. In fact, if you aren't asking that question, you'll be easily led astray with some bad practices that may be offered as good practice. So, of course, it's important to be critical and think through things. I do the same thing. But to go beyond that, there's a couple different approaches when we look at the parenting resources that are out there. There's experience-based resources and there's research-based resources. And by definition, I'm not a researcher. Now, by practice, I do research. I read on parenting. I read parenting books, a couple every year. I've read dozens in the past, not hundreds, but dozens. And so I've done my own research, but I'm not a researcher by the academia standards. So I'm speaking out of experience-based. And let me be the first to tell you, I'm not the best father in the world. I don't have the best ideas. I like to learn and pick up ideas from other people, but I'm not the foremost expert on fatherhood. So let me say that first of all. But then second of all, there's another way we could look at it. And sometimes we just need to step back and do some self-evaluation and go, am I giving my children the very best that I have to offer? And so one way to look at that is by asking, are there behaviors or actions that we could do as fathers that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt would completely ruin our children for life? And the answer is yes. There are things that we could do as fathers that would ruin our children for life. So maybe step 1 is, how about we acknowledge and articulate what those things are and we don't do them. So if we know that physical abuse is really bad for children, how about we don't physically abuse children, right? So there's things we can just stop doing. If we know cursing our kids is going to destroy them for life, how about we don't curse our kids? If we know that just even how we speak to them, we can tear them down with our words, how about we don't do that? So there's all these things that we know we certainly shouldn't do. If getting drunk and being violent or whatever, whatever it is, exposing our kids to drugs, I have all these extreme examples, but we know there are things that we can do to destroy our kids. So how about step 1, we don't do those. But then step 2, if you begin to reverse engineer that, how about we actually do the opposite? So instead of physically being violent with our kids, how about we use physical touch to affirm and lift up our kids? A positive, appropriate physical touch, hugs, high fives, the bro hug, the claps, right? That's something good. How about instead of getting drunk and being hateful with our words, how about we don't get drunk, we stay in control, and we lift up with our words. We speak life, we encourage. How about instead, like, we know if we spoil our kids, they are spoiled. The result is kind of in the verb spoil. So how about we don't do that? We can do the opposite, and then we could dig into that. And so I share all this with you because if you're a father like me, you really do want to bring your best to the table when it comes to your family, when it comes to your children. That can't happen accidentally. It can only happen if we're intentional about it. Therein lies the purpose and the mission of the Intentional Father podcast. So I can't wait for season 4. I hope you join us, and let's make it great.